Hello and welcome to Spare Change Podcast. Today I have on Katie from Solopreneur Cafe. Katie, feel free to introduce yourself, tell people everything that you've been doing in the financial space and some of the things that you've experienced, both with your blog and all of your other online ventures.
Sure. I won't say I'm new to the personal finance space online, because I've been following everybody since 2008, because I'd say the apex of blogging hit right about the same time that the economy crashed. What are they calling that these days? The Great Recession. And but I only recently found my niche, and it's really outstanding at the moment. It's all about managing your finances when you're self-employed, whether you're an independent contractor or a solopreneur or a freelancer. Um, it's covers basically anybody with an inconsistent income, and there are more and more of us now. What are they talking about? Like almost 30% of the workforce at this point is at least part-time freelance. So it's uh it's definitely something that needs to be addressed because most people are like flying by the seat of their pants because it's intimidating to deal with. So I'm establishing Solopreneur Cafe to help them, whether on their path to whatever they consider to be financial freedom or at least some sense of stability.
One of the things that I found interesting, at least that I had seen from you, is that, like you spoke about coming from the perspective of someone who doesn't have a consistent income, and especially now where it's growing into a much bigger audience, where in 2020 when the pandemic shut everything down, there became like this growing need for gig economy style jobs, whether it be Uber or DoorDash. A lot of people couldn't go out and do what they needed to do, so they started to rely more and more on these less conventional means to achieve the same goals. What have you seen in the last year or so since starting Solopreneur Cafe that stuck out to you as something that's new in the workforce and maybe potentially new in just personal finance?
Well, there are a couple of things. One of them is that it's almost like gig economy or the concept of gig has started getting like I don't want to say bad reputation, but like it's something that people don't desire anymore quite as much as or in quite the same way that they did a couple of years ago. Um, because it's, associated with these platforms that some of them are more reliable or pay better than others. Um, and it's also relying, a lot of that stuff, like if you do DoorDash or Instacart, you're relying a lot on tips that are not reliable. Especially when you see things with all kinds of fees added, you assume that they've somehow added a tip in or something. But in any case, I think that was a really big deal the first year of the pandemic. And then as it grew, I think a lot of people really like the idea of not working for someone else. And but they have evolved into doing something else, whatever it is. All you have to do is think about all the stuff we've seen online about, hey, take a coding boot camp and they don't cost that much, they don't take that long, and you can make good money. So there's been a lot of stuff like that, people learning to monetize their knowledge. And I think that's a big part of why they talk about I hate seeing that part where it's like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore. Yeah, they do. They just don't want to work for you.
Right. And that
That I'm
makes
a
sense.
firm believer in that. It's not that people don't want to work. It's they don't want those conditions anymore.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
So one of the things that I've also noticed, especially talking about the younger generations and personal finance, trying to get away from like ordinary means of building wealth and
Hmm.
working for themselves. When we talk about investment classes, we're starting to see some new things, whether it's a gravitation towards fintech resources and apps,
Hmm.
or even just like investing in cryptocurrency and NFTs. That's become a huge space. Um, do you think that like entrepreneurship and freelancing has a place in that space where we start to talk about different or new investments and the ways that people are trying to shift away from classic finance?
Right now, it feels like the Wild West. And I actually love fintech. I have delved into bits and pieces of it, not so much the crypto, but some of the alternative savings accounts out there. Like I had a big account with, now it's smaller, like with Outlet Finance, where people use their Ethereum holdings to collateralize a loan that is usually, they don't really state this, but I think it's used to buy more crypto. But my money stays in dollars. And I was getting 9% annual return for a long time. And then they had to cut it back to 5% because whenever crypto goes down in value, so apparently does the need for these loans and the ability to collateralize them. So now that's down to 5%. And I'm also looking at, like, I put some money into Bank with Fair, which it's not FDIC insured, but it's another kind of insurance. So I don't think it protects the returns on your money, but I think it protects what you put in, your original money. But it's not FDIC, it's like FDIS or I can't remember. So I experiment on what I consider a bit of a safer level. And the other stuff, like when you're talking about NFTs and crypto, and there's that it's, you have to sit back and wonder what's going to turn out to be a fad and what's here to stay.
Right.
And there are people that have been able to, you get in at the beginning and you make the money. I mean, that's kind of how everything works. Um, but what has staying power is a whole different ball of wax. I'm starting to see, in fact, I think they're going to be one of the sponsors or they're in the expo, Acre Trader. Now, I'm not a, what do they call that? Something investor. I'm forgetting.
Would it be Angel or?
No, it's like a qualified, you have $1 million net worth.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
forget the word. Um, but I'm not one of those, so I can't use Acre Trader. But there are a couple of other harvest returns. It's a little different. And so it's kind of a way to be, well, Acre Trader is a way to be invested in land as opposed to, single family houses, which are really popular in the concept of fire. Um, I think those look really cool. But again, they're very much in their early stages of establishing a reputation and whether or not what if their model works. Um, so I'm kind of navigating that. I do think people want alternatives because we like adrenaline, but we don't really want to, bet it all on black at the casino, But uh, so these alternatives, especially when you see like you don't want to deal with being a landlord, but you want to see you want to be invested in some kind of land or real estate, and there's a million options out there. So choice is only a good thing. So,
I definitely think the range of options for at least the way that we utilize our money now is there's even apps for selling your house, like beyond what Zillow was doing. With
oh yeah.
now there's Open Door, and you can literally like match buyer to seller almost like it's a dating site. Um, and the same thing with cars, like used or new cars on Carvana. And you can also put your car up for daily rent like you would an Airbnb, and people will pay you to utilize your vehicle when you're not.
Yep, like Toro and stuff. So not only that, but you can get some very interesting vehicles. I've heard it's like a really good way to try out what it's like to have a Tesla or, an electric car in
Right.
general. So, uh, I think that's probably been a really good thing in the past couple of years with the, um, oh, here's a pandemic. We're going to sell off all of our cars because nobody's renting them. So all the car rental companies sold off their stock, and then you've got a car shortage at the other end of things. And I love hearing about those people who bought one of those, X rental cars, and then, a year later they're selling it for a profit. Like who would have thought that would happen? But that's pretty cool when it does.
I think we're just in such a world that's able to connect, and that can be a good or a
Mm.
bad thing. I talk a lot about the way social media has changed the way that we spend our money, where someone who's really popular on social media can tag like 4 or 5 brands, and then you're on their website buying clothes because you looked at a picture. Like it is really quick to spend your money online now versus what it's been in the past. Um,
Oh yeah, I've noticed. I've clicked on stuff like in my Instagram feed or whatever. But then what I do is I just look it up in Amazon and you find it for half the price with free shipping. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's the same thing. It's being made in the same factory. It's just got a different, brand name or whatever. So that's how I get my like pet products to clean up the hair.
Yeah, I'm sure when all my Amazon boxes start stacking up, there's more questions than answers as to how they got there sometimes. Um, and one of the things I wanted to highlight, like we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but when you talk about, you know, having maybe not the most consistent like pay, or
Oh yeah.
maybe it's a little different the way you're paid. What have you done specifically to kind of overcome some of the difficulties that come with an inconsistent paycheck? And then what would you advise others to do when maybe money's tight or they're trying to find a new way to earn money beyond their day-to-day life?
I think of having three numbers, which basically represent monthly expenses. So you've got the one that you have right now to live your life, whatever that number is. And, I also include, I think it's a terrible name for it, but the concept is excellent, sinking funds. For anybody who's listening who doesn't know what they are, it's those inconsistent but predictable expenses out there. Like, whether it's a $30 oil change or, hey, your car tires are good for 50,000 miles. And they'll tell you, when you go in for an oil change, you're going to have to get new tires in the next few months. But you know that these things are going to happen. You know that you're going to have to pay dental deductible. There's things that you know. You may or may not know when, but Christmas is coming. It comes every year on the same day, and there's no reason to go into debt for it because there's no reason you can't plan for that. It's not surprise, it's Christmas. Um, peop Weddings, birthdays, that kind of stuff, whether there's a trip involved, you know about these things well in advance. And you also know that these life events, you just don't, hey, I don't know who's going to get married this year, but I know somebody is, that kind of thing. And, if they don't, so you have a little extra money, is that really that bad? So you take a nicer vacation that year, or you add it to your savings if that's what appeals to you. But so your first number, it includes those sinking funds, and uh, your Roth IRA contributions or whatever it is that you do very consistently. And I think of it, oh, and I also include the extra for what I would have to pay taxes. So it's like, well, I need $2,000 a month to live, so I really should at least make 2,500, for example. Just I ballpark that because from 2,500 earned, that's 20%. You always have to pay 15% on for self-employment tax and Social Security, which sucks because you have to pay it on the whole thing, not just the over your individual deduction, the 12,000 something number. But that part really sucks. And then, 5% might be a low estimate. You can always change that depending on your circumstances. But, it's an easy rule of thumb is to add 25% to your number for taxes. So let's say your number's 2,500 and you keep track, whether mentally or physically, on a piece of paper, how much you've earned so far that month. And if you're going to be short, this is where the gig stuff comes in real handy because you can turn yourself on or off with a click of a button in the app. And okay, I'm going to be at this rate. I'm probably going to be about $300 short. You know what? I think I'll Uber on a Saturday night from 9 p.m. until 3 a.m. and I'll be able to, something like that. And just kind of know that because you've already done it. Build a reputation so that it does become something you can successfully fall back on. Let me see. So that's your one number for living your life as it is. Then you got your bare bones number, which is like, okay, if I don't put money into my IRA, if I don't, if I cut back on a few things, my eating out budget, I normally spend $200 a month on that. What if I cut that to 100? Assuming you've paced it through the month and you can sit there and pull back on it. So maybe that number brings you down to 2,000 or 1,800 for the month. And then to me, the third number is the aspirational number. Like, what would I add to my life if I had the money? If it turns out maybe you want to belong to a really expensive gym, like what I consider really expensive. There's like these burn boot camps and bar places that are like 100, depending on where you are, they're like $130 to $170 a month. That's a big expense. And it's not $30 a month for a gym. So that might be something that you look forward to adding once you see that you're consistently hitting that next highest number. So it's a way to give you something to look forward to, inspire you if it's something you really want. If it's the financial independence thing, if you're balls to the wall, I'm gonna save my ass off so I can get out of this hamster wheel or whatever.
Right.
Then you do that. But so you figure out your priorities. They may change. There's nothing wrong with that. Mine do. I won't say all the time, but I wasn't a homeowner until I was 44. I lived in New York City for a big chunk of time. That is not an affordable market to own your home.
Yeah, I'd say,
It's
or a car for that matter. It's
well,
probably.
it's pointless to own a car. Yeah.
um, so a lot of what you just spoke on, it kind of fits right into the realm of like when we talk about personal finances. Not only managing your expectations of like what you can really afford, but talking about, if there's something you want, uh, and you're not quite meeting that goal, maybe you need to like kind of reevaluate and shift the balance of your wants and needs. Or like you said, when you're coming up short of something, maybe the only thing you need to do is sacrifice a little time, or kind of put your comfort level down a little bit, just to, you know if you know you have the time and you can budget your time, you can also meet your goals financially in a way that you might not have even thought about if you kind of just apply yourself to whatever it might be, whether it's pulling extra hours at work or it's finding a new stream of income. Whether
Mm-hmm.
that's, you could sell things. There's a huge market for like building out your own um like sales page or whatever you want to do overall. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of opportunities to supplement your income beyond just working extra hours, or you know you don't have to like sell all of your assets just to get where you need to go.
I'm not a big fan of that because you always sell for so much less than you ever paid for it, for the most part,
Right.
unless you happen to own 50-year-old Pyrex dishes or something. So that was something I recently read has had some kind of resurgence in popularity and price. And I don't know if it's just like, hey, somebody put their grandmother's dish on eBay for $10,000 and everybody's like, oh, it's worth that now. But it never actually, so you never know how that really went.
And just
But
kind of just hit the nail on the head for me. We just bought a bunch of glass Tupperware.
hmm
um, but yeah, and you talked about like, maybe meeting what is perceived to be like everybody's common goal, which is like, especially in America, it's kind of heavily implied that you should at some point become a homeowner. But if it's not, something that you need, like if you're living in a big city like New York and it's not realistic for you, then more often than not, a lot of people just get caught up in keeping up with everybody else. And
hmm
especially social media has kind of furthered this idea that you need all this nice stuff because it's all you see all the time. And instead, I think it's interesting to kind of verbalize that, like, you don't need to be like everybody else. There are ways that you can meet your needs and have satisfaction in life outside of just what you see on Instagram or Facebook. There are ways to
hmm
find personal satisfaction, personal development within the framework of all of my needs are met and I have enough money to do the things that I want to do.
hmm
Um, and I think it fits right into the kind of idea that, a lot of us get down on ourselves or beat ourselves up because we're not meeting an expectation that we've set. Um,
hmm
and I think it's important to manage expectations, especially financially, because when you feel like you're missing out or you have like fear, uncertainty, and doubt related to money issues, and you're constantly in this mindset of, I don't have what I want, I don't have enough, it impedes your ability to grow outside of the framework that you've already put in your mind. If that makes sense. I don't know if there's a
It
better.
does. I kind of figured that out pretty early on when I've started seeing this a little bit in the personal finance space about thinking of something you're going to buy in terms of how long it took you to earn that money. So if you say, wow, let's go back to that all that crap they talk about lattes. Wow, I spend, $30 a week at Starbucks. That's is that really worth one of my 40 hours a week at work? Which is, the pre-tax amount of somebody earning about 45,000 a year. Um, and if you think of it that way, it can really change how you feel about your coffee. And it'll be like, hell yeah, that's all it costs to keep me going the other 39 hours. Or it might be no, I think I can start, maybe I'll just buy a Keurig and make life a little easier, but not so expensive. Um, so it is a kind of a good way to think about that. But I realized, I was in the early and mid 80s, I was making $2 an hour babysitting at a time when everybody had to have Guess jeans, not just Vanderbilt or Jordache. Guess. Guess were $50 a pair. You could get cheap jeans with no name for like 15, $20 a pair. You can probably do that even less now. It's kind of funny. But the ones I wanted, I could get a cheap version for like 15, 20 bucks a pair. I was buying my own clothes. And I very quickly realized that's 25 hours for one pair of jeans. No, not doing it. It's not worth it to me to have that label. I don't understand what makes them so fancy. I'm just going to outgrow them in a year anyway, because, you're still growing when you're 13. So I really didn't see the point in spending 25 hours of my sad little earnings. I can't tell you how awesome I think it is that babysitters are making so much more now. But anyway, um, uh, yeah. So I used to think like that way before it was a thing, which a few people have started to talk in those terms, and I actually think it's a pretty good way to figure out if something is worth it to you. That time cost, I
Yeah.
think they
And
call it.
and I think the time value of money also plays into the bigger question of, what is your time actually worth? And in the entrepreneurship and like um when you're on your own and you're building your own brand, or you're selling a product that you put your own effort into beyond working for a company, it's important to know like the value that you've put into your product in order to understand like what you should be charging for it, or even, is it worth it for you to continue that based on like the return that you're getting on your effort. And a lot of times when people look at their 9 to 5s, and I think this is where the shift might be coming,
Hmm.
um, people see that their money is getting them so much less, like the amount of time that they've spent, the money that they're earning based on that time is not meeting their criteria for what they need and want.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to understand like, no, not every company can pay you the type of money that you're going to desire to meet financial independence, but also like knowing your self-worth and not accepting, you know, something that's not beneficial to you is also important. And I think a lot of people who are younger kind of struggle with the idea of like marketing their skills, whether they're hard or soft skills, and knowing the true value of what they're capable of versus the first job comes across the counter and they just accept it based on
Mm,
they need money. Um,
yeah.
and I think that plays a huge role in the gig economy because you can start and stop at will. And also in entrepreneurship, you can kind of build, your pricing models based on the effort that you put into it, or however you want to do it. I know a lot of um, younger people who are starting businesses might be used to the idea of like, okay, I work a 9 to 5 and this should be my salary, but maybe you should start thinking of it in the amount of effort that you've put into something. And I think that's an interesting way to look at like growth of wealth.
Yeah, I've seen mistakes made on at both ends of the spectrum when it comes to valuing your time, especially, as a freelancer. There's that difference between, you're worth it. Make that price really high. You're definitely worth $300 an hour or whatever it is that you're going to charge as a coach. And but to turn around and say, but who do you want to help? I want to help people who um, are transitioning to being self-employed or have just started out. They're not the six-figure earners. Maybe six-figure earners can afford a $300 an hour coach. My people can't. Or if they do put that money out there, it's a big investment and they're really worried about being disappointed and wasting their money. So, why would I ever price my service at something like that? That's not realistic for your audience. So it's not just about what you are worth, it's also what the service is worth. And also, for example, I'm kicking off a kind of a program incredibly cheap, like $2 a week, but it's a 6-month commitment for getting out of debt. because one of the key components that if you Google how to get out of debt, you'll come across a bunch of articles and they all tell you, accountability and support. Well, who are you going to get that from? Because you got a few factors going in there. Like if I tell people I'm getting out of debt and then I get out of debt, how do I know they're not going to turn around and try to borrow money from me? Oh, she doesn't have any debt. She's got room on her credit card. She can help me out. I've seen people do it. So, depending on who's in your life, that support can bite you in the ass. Um, and we've, I don't think this um, applies to you and I, but the idea that money is a taboo topic. Like people would rather put their whole sex lives out there online and naked pictures, literally naked pictures, than put up a bank statement, you know?
Yeah.
And
And I talk about that too, where it's like
yeah,
one of the most taboo conversations, you can't talk about certain things when you're sitting in a bar stool. And those things include like God, politics, money, sex. It's like, why is the money conversation so like tied
it's the
up?
last one.
Right.
Well,
Nobody wants to talk about
also,
it, but a lot of people
people,
need to.
yeah, and people, well, they lie depending on the context, the situation that they're in. Like they don't want to admit they have this much debt, or again, they don't want to tell you how much money they have to make because people, or how much money they make because people are going to try to hit them up or expect them to pick up the tab whenever they go out. And I mean, my brother's one of those people. He makes really good money, and I kind of hear even within the family, oh, he can afford it. And I'm like, maybe that's not what he wants to spend his money on. Just because he can afford it doesn't mean he should be paying for it. Um, so I have a different view. Yes, sure, he makes, 3, 4 times what I do, but I don't expect anything from him. Just because I'm related, I don't have any right to his money. But that's how people behave. Oh, you've got more than me. You can afford it. You can do this for me. Oh, gee, thanks. That's what I really want to do with my money. So keeping it private, especially when you have it, makes a lot of sense. But getting to the point where even just getting back to that zero of I have no debt, even though I really don't have much in the way of savings, um, that's an interesting place to be. And I think that's where a lot of people make it sound like they are for their own reasons. Whether it's to look better or to prevent people from expecting. But there's a you never really know the story. I mean, I have people who ask me for help, like friends and family. They don't tell me the whole story. And I'm like, why did you take my advice? I wouldn't have given you that advice if I'd known.
Right.
Now all you've done is hurt yourself more. And now I mean, I don't feel responsible for it because they chose not to tell me. But I'm like, you're an idiot. Why would you not tell me that?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people keep
They're
uh
an idiot for not telling me that, not an idiot for whatever the problem is that they wouldn't tell me.
yeah, I think a lot of people just keep the idea that like um there's like a shame or a burden behind not having your, for lack of a better word, not having your shit together financially, where it's like, okay, I've spent more money than I was able to bring in, and
Hmm.
then they're like so worried about how that makes them look that they get kind
Hmm.
of like paralyzed in the idea of like, yeah, well, nobody's gonna help me anyway, or nobody cares that I'm broke, and like there are resources available for people. Um, Maybe not all the perfect answers, but at least some way of building your way out of that debt or that financial crisis that you might have gone through.
Hmm.
um and I think it's important for people to at least be more confident in the idea that uh maybe not everybody has the answers for you, but you could make a lot more progress if you at least have some level of conversation about money with somebody who either knows more than you about money or has demonstrated that they're willing to show you the right way forward with your financial situation.
And I also know that it can be very difficult to pick who to listen to. I think that's why they tend to come to me because I'm not selling a product.
Right.
I'm not trying to sell them insurance or a crypto scheme or anything else that's out there. Um, and I mean, my getting out of debt program, sure you pay the little fee for that, but I'm not benefiting from suggesting one thing over another.
Right.
I've been hurt by that. Like I bought a whole life policy when I was 38. I cashed it out last year. 13 years. 13 years of putting in a little over $9,000 a year. And I had $6,000 more than I put in. That still rankles. But anyway, because I know that, I made 6,000. The guy who sold it to me made 25
Yeah.
ages ago.
There's
Yeah,
a
it's
lot of
painful.
predatory processes financially to
Yeah. And
to that level of trust.
even for getting out of debt, trying to figure out, okay, which ones are the real, if you're going to do, well, there's debt consolidation. That's totally different. And a lot of people don't realize that. Then when you go with one of those places where you send one chunk of money and they actually distribute it to your different credit cards. Um, that's most it's for people who, maybe aren't so good at paying their bills. They pay one bill, but they're really paying five bills. Um, and I actually think that's not bad because they usually are able to negotiate way more than their fees worth of reduction in interest. So, but there's debt.org and debt.com. I can't say I've looked at either one of them, but how do you know they're which one is good? Are they both good? Are they both, not good? So get just it's a maze to get through, and I totally understand the intimidation people get from it. But yeah, so a lot of it is to bring it back to the whole Solopreneur Cafe thing. Sometimes you don't even know what you're supposed to do. You're not even sure what you need, what you should have, what you even want to have. Something as simple as life insurance. It's like it's not it is and it isn't simple. Your employer provided you with 100,000. Well, no, you don't have an employer anymore. Do you need it? How much do you need? What kind do you need? There's a whole bunch of questions there that if you're not into money, it's you just sit there and your eyes glaze over and you're like, I'll figure this out another day or year.
I think that fits into the idea of like there are so many financial resources, tools, and regulations in the world where you based on your situation, you're probably going to face at some point
Hmm.
an overload in the availability of choices that you have in front of you. So choice overload, paralysis by analysis, whatever you want to
Oh
call it.
yeah.
There are so many things that people face when they're trying to have that financial conversation. I think that might be a limiting factor for especially some of the younger folks who are trying to build themselves up financially, where okay,
And
I'm
even
someone who can
and I deal with a lot of older folks who are like, I never took care of this when I was younger, and I don't know if it's too late now or what. And I'm like, you know, if they're my age, 52, standard retirement age these days is 67. Who knows? It could even increase by the time we get there. But you know, with that whole the stock market returns on average 9% a year, like you can double your money twice by the time you hit standard retirement age. That's worth doing. It just is. But to think, oh, it's too late, why even bother, is, uh, you know, you get stuck in a position of having some, but not enough. And what that qualifies you for from the government versus what you supply for yourself. And it's like you're better off rich or poor, but somewhere in the middle where most of us are is not a happy place sometimes
Yeah, I think I
as you
think
get older.
think there's a lot of things that play into the difficulty of the financial conversation. Um,
Mm,
it it's definitely interesting to me to hear from a lot of different folks, especially when I reached out on the app for FinCon, where I was like, who would like to have a conversation? Really, that's more or less the question I was asking. Um, and then I had a bunch of different people from different sides of the conversation come in and want to talk, but it interests me, like, even from the business ownership aspect all the way down to, you know everyday, like, people are on social media talking about money. People talk about money as financial coaches. People talk about money just as, like, their niche audience on, whether it's a blog or a podcast or whatever. Um, if there's so many conversations about money and so many, like, different ways to handle your money, I think a lot of people might find it hard to decide, like you said, where to listen. Um, Definitely interested. What really, like, brought you into the financial conversation? What interested you in, like, FinCon, and how do you find your specific motivation to talk about money?
from being around a lot of people who are self-employed and seeing that a lot of them are handling it wrong. A lot of them. There's some that have got it perfect, and then you've got those a lot who are floundering somewhere in between the two. And a lot of it comes down to I'm not really sure what I need to be doing. And, like, do I need a corporate entity? Now that's not actually my best that's not something I speak to because I find that part a little confusing myself. Um, and I'm like, solopreneur, how are your assets looking? You got to just protect your assets, whatever it takes. That's where I go with it. But yeah, so that's how I chose the niche was because of what I was around and what I was seeing.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think environment and connections that we make on a daily basis play a huge part, and that's what interested me. Was I've said this before, but when I left, you know, I left the military, and 6 days later, I was at Mill Money Con learning from people who have been in the finance industry for years and years.
mhm.
But the idea that you can have these small level conversations and build so much knowledge in such a short amount of time, like 3 days, put me in a headspace where I went from one recording for this podcast to now we're at 23 episodes.
Yep. I know. I
So,
looked you up. I saw 20, but you've probably recorded a few since
yeah,
then.
it's so, like, night and day the amount of conversations I've had and the things that I've been learning. So I think that's super valuable. Definitely want to highlight a lot of the things that you've been doing, and wanted to ask really quick before we kind of start wrapping things up. What is one thing that you would advise um, someone who's just getting started on their journey to build wealth, or maybe become an entrepreneur and work outside of a 9 to 5? What would be one piece of advice that you would give them, and then where can people find you?
Okay. My advice probably differs from quite a lot because of where I started. Um, they, I think I've heard the term a necessity entrepreneur, which means I blissfully lost a job I hated and spent 9 months trying to get another job. And the economy just sucked. It was 2002, 2003. It was after, I don't think it was necessarily the tech bubble a little bit, but it was more about the rise of tech making certain things obsolete that I was in New York City. Anyway, um, so I became self-employed because it was like that or nothing. And I tried a bunch of things. It was like throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And that was it. I was never going to go back to being employed. A lot of advice you'll see out there is to have 1 to 2 years of your expenses saved before you quit your job. I would say you don't need that much. That's a very high amount and very conservative amount. Um, I would even, because you have gig options that you can go ahead and set up in advance, you can also do some of those interesting passive streams well in advance. You're not going to suddenly have zero and whatever your number one source of freelance income is, it's not your only one and it's not going to hit zero. It just isn't. It's not going to be like all of a sudden all of your clients fire you. If the economy sucks, yes, you're going to have fewer clients, but they're not all going to go away. So having 6 months or 3 months or whatever expenses in the bank is going to last you a lot longer than that, unless you get sick. I mean, that's a big issue. But if we're just talking about the economy and things going as they've been going for you, especially since the state of the economy is such a big deal right now, I'd say don't don't put it off. Don't put it off until you have, hey, I need 60,000 in the bank before I can quit. If that's going to take you 5 years to save up, and that's pretty good rate of savings, probably. No, no, you'll make it work because you've already got what it takes. Because you've already started something. You have the foundation, you've got the next level up, and it's not going to go to zero.
I think that's really awesome to think about, where it's like, if you have the drive and you build the foundation for something, it just requires, a continuous conscious effort to make it work. And it I think confidence plays a huge factor in what you were just talking about. Um, and one of the things that I've talked about before, where it's like, over time, you're not going to know everything immediately, and not everything's going to work overnight. But
Hmm.
putting a conscious stream of effort will enable you to learn the necessary lessons and build the confidence in yourself to accomplish a goal. And I think it's important to understand that things do take time, but eventually, if you put your effort in, you'll see the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, and be responsive, resilient, resourceful. If those are words that people would use to describe you, you're in really good shape for being out there on your own. Because it means that you can change with the market, either what you offer or who you appeal to, or your entire business model. If you've got that flexibility in your head, you can make it work out in the real world. Um, and you can find me at solopreneurcafe.com. Um, Let me see. And I'm starting to have a little fun on Instagram where I'm Katie underline Solopreneur Cafe.
Yeah. When you said like starting to have a little fun on Instagram, I can relate, because like I'm so not the person who's got like a social media schedule. I am very
Mm-mm.
much like, I have to have the want to do it. So when I start to see like even small results, it builds that like positive feedback. And I think a big part of social media is a feedback loop. So if you
I'm
can,
also not in, I'm not super into polished branding.
oh yeah,
I mean, I suppose I might change my mind one of these days, but right now I'm like, do it ugly. Because if I don't do it ugly, I'm not going to do it at all. And if I just see a great meme that is relevant to my audience, it's going up.
oh
It,
yeah.
it's, you know,
I'll have
hey,
to
you
check
can
that
afford a
out.
car or you can avoid or you can afford the gas, but you can't afford both, stuff like that.
I'll have to check that out. I think it's great that you got like kind of a meme page rolling because that's I think that works on Instagram, and I think it's a good effort for anyone who's trying to like actually launch
Hmm.
um either a brand or at least a community around what they're building online. Definitely want to say that I appreciated your time today, Katie, and I think that if not anybody else learning, I definitely learned something, and I hope that the audience can retrieve some valuable information from the things that we talked about today. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. It was good talking to you.
I look forward to bumping into you next week.
Absolutely.
Okay.